Life Gang.
We are coming to you from the Solvent Direct studio at the Good Life Gang house. And this is our highly technical panel. It is 2023. We are in Las Vegas. It's MJ Biz Week. Everybody's pretty high. I know, we're excited, right? This is like our big dance. This is our prom. This is our prom.
So glad you opened. Prom.
Yeah.
Glad you opened with that.
It's very much that way. No, that's what we're here for. And here's what I love. In crafting this panel, here's what I'm about. Cannabis nerd. Yes, I'm cannabis nerd positive. And also, we all love the plant. We love it. We love it. And we're finding a niche in it. And like my niche is kind of technical in the extraction space. And then you all bring another whole level of it. And I want to talk about that. We can go where we want to go, but you guys are so smart. I want to hear you talk. I'm going to start with Riley. Could you just introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do, and we'll just slide down the way.
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Riley Kirk. I'm a natural product chemist, and I'm here representing the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy, which is a newly launched nonprofit to study plant medicine, but from a community perspective, so we can understand the trends that people are using natural products and how we can educate people and use natural products a little smarter and share our tips and tricks as well.
I love it. I loved it. Miyabe.
Hi, I'm Miyabe Sheilds, and I also am repping NAP. And Riley and I both have our PhDs in pharmaceutical sciences. We both studied drug discovery. I studied the system in the brain that interacts with cannabis, the endocannabinoid system, and worked like directly on the targets in the brain and the body that interact with cannabis. Riley worked with the molecules of the plant and other plants, lots of natural medicines and where they came from. And together we've been really passionate about using science as advocacy and about talking about the interpretation and the communication of science out there, and especially when it comes to cannabis, especially when it comes to natural medicines, and especially when it comes to our quality of life and our community, which has been a disenfranchised and discriminated against community, specifically in science and medicine. So that's what our nonprofit aims to use our research for, and to interpret and communicate our research for.
Thank you. I would also like to say, if I had a PhD, you'd all be calling me Dr. Something. Everybody be calling me Dr. Something.
Call me Dr. Dank now.
Okay, Dr. Dank. Here we go. Darwin.
Okay, so I have to follow that. That's
right,
no pressure there. So my name's Darwin Millard. I'm colloquially known as the Spock of cannabis. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I don't have a PhD, but over my 18 years of hands-on experience in industry, I have become a specialist in mechanical and solvent-based extraction methodologies for isolating terpenolic secondary metabolites from botanicals, which is a fancy way of saying I know how to make oil well. But most recently, I'm like incredibly passionate about this plant and being able to standardize it in a way that allows us to actually make an effective commodities marketplace for all stakeholders, no matter whom their, economic or social impact relationship with the plant may be. And as with that, I've been a volunteer member with ASTM International's Technical Committee D37 on cannabis for the past almost 8 years now. And that's a technical committee looking to create standards for the cannabis industry. And I volunteer as the vice chair for the D3704, which is a subcommittee dedicated to creating standards on processing and handling. And I am also the current chair for the D3708, which is another one of the 14 subcommittees that is dedicated to creating standards for personal use and at-home devices and appliances.
I love it. Darwin, that's when we met. We met at an ASTM meeting. I don't even remember where. Maybe it was Long Beach or somewhere, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I absolutely love that work. And I feel like when you say words like commodities market, standardization, there's this visceral response from cannabis, which is like, fuck you, government, standardizing my plant, standardizing my medicine, making it a commodity. This is the problem. ASTM is not that. Talk to me about that response, because I didn't make that up. You've heard this, right?
Of course, yeah.
And talk to me about the real work that you're doing.
Yeah, so that's so ASTM International isn't government. That's a kind of a very good first point to make. It's a group of volunteer members, technical experts, like everybody here, which is great about it. Unlike ISO, which is, say, one vote per country on a particular subject, ASTM's process is completely open to anybody anywhere in the world. So it's much more like a participatory democracy type of thing, which makes the standards that are created through that process very robust. But it takes a long time to create these volunteer consensus standards through that process. But that's how ASTM over 125 years has developed a reputation for creating highly technical, relevant standards for the marketplace. And what makes them...
ASTM does everything. The durometer of your tire. What is a tire? What is a snow tire? What is a big rig tire? Like any gasket that's in anything you own, anything that's like the length, the height of your bumper off the ground on cars. Like
I did not know that was volunteer,
no,
that was based on
ASTM
volunteer standards.
That's
incredible.
All of that. And what's in any industry you can imagine. I'm so frustrated with myself that I'm not thinking of more examples. I don't know why I'm on the car example, but ASTM does so many things. It's a huge body. And what is the magic and the beauty of it? And I had, previous to my cannabis part, I had some experience with laboratory equipment. And what's amazing is you get people who come together who are like competitors in real life. You know what I mean? And usually it's the engineering side, and they're not. You know what I mean? The engineers are more about the pure science and the what's good and right, and not so much the competition between companies. But it is really wonderful when people that are at the top of their game in their technical space come together to make these recommendations, right? And then industries follow that. I mean, that's what best practice work is, really, I think so. And so seeing that coming to cannabis is wonderful because it's just going to provide a framework to help us launch into bigger spaces, It's
also not it's not like necessarily like an immediate thing where it's going to be like, okay, the moment this comes in, it's going to be like everyone's going to have to change. Right. But what it will allow people to do is have reproducibility. It's like an increase of reproducibility will always be an increase of the quality of the medicine for patients who need a reproducible effect. And that's a huge number of medical patients. It's not to say that you can't branch out and have other experiences. Like we all love trying new things, but standardization is like an incredible step. Even the standardization in the language that we use needs to start evolving and happening. And that's something else we've talked a lot about is that there's a disconnect between all of these different pieces, especially within the industry, and that there can be like a pushback against something like this where it's like standardization. No, like we don't want to change the way that we talk about it. We don't want to change the way that we measure. We don't want to change the scoops that we use.
But I love your point on, making standardization, making it safer, making it more consistent. A lot of people are replacing their pharmaceutical medications with cannabis, and they have certain expectations. They have trust in the industry to believe that that product is a high-quality product. There's not residual solvents. It's made with that top-tier pharmaceutical quality, but it's still our favorite plant, and it's still incredibly safe, and it's dosable. And it's really important to think about that aspect of medicine for those people.
And we're capable of it.
Yeah.
So each of you hit on something like a type of standard that ASTM creates, which is so amazing. So terminology being one of 6 different types, because without having a standard set of terminology, we can't speak the same language. And so when we say the word cannabis even,
yeah, what is are you talking about cannabis or are you talking about marijuana? Because in some states that means something. Forget politically what marijuana means, but it's like in some states there's THC is marijuana and cannabis is hemp. And so it's different markets, different regulations because we don't even have standardization there. It's difficult. It's difficult to do that and even have the conversation without standard terms, right?
We need to get rid of that. We're not calling cocaine cocaína in the legal literature. I just think we should get rid of it because it's Spanish. It's like the correct term for Spanish, but like I feel like in the United States, like all the laws and all the medical documentation should be in English. But that's just my my personal opinion of that. My state still uses it, so
Oregon can't decide what's an extract and what's a concentrate. And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe hash is hash, but maybe it really freaking matters because your license type is dependent on that. Your solvent type feeds into that.
Whether you're compliant or not
feeds into is it an extract or a concentrate, and we need to think about it and talk about it. And the people that are willing to do that are not the wonks that are making policy. They need to be informed by technical people in those fields.
And the timing is now. I was talking to Darwin about this. If we wait until states pass their own legal landscapes and they do it incorrectly, it takes more time and more effort to change those rules after the fact when they could just implement these rules from the start and save a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, so like ASTM's created through volunteer members something in the neighborhood of like 12,500 standards, and 8,500 of those are actually codified through reference in U.S. law. And there is I wish I had it right off the top of my head, but there is a U.S. law that actually grandfathers in consensus standards. So if there exists a standard in a topic that Congress is going to pass a law on and needs to start structuring regulations around, their first thing they have to do is a literature review of what exists. And these standards, especially those created by ASTM International, which have already been adopted and codified by reference in many other technical industries, are like an easy first pull at allowing the FDA to figure things out, like maybe labeling, for instance, on what really matters for the content of these consumer products, and terminology, for instance, like maybe moving away from calling them cannabis products and focus on the constituents of concern, which are the cannabinoids. I've been using consumer products containing cannabinoids because that's an easy consumer product categorization, and grades and classifications are another type of standard where we can further delineate and further classify consumer products that contain cannabinoids and the ones that contain intoxicating or non-intoxicating cannabinoids. And then you could also further go, if a regulatory authority does so, define either one of those or classify them as hemp based on certain laws and definitions there. But that's where we start getting into moral and philosophical arguments about.
It becomes non-scientific very, very quickly. I mean, is it eye cream with CBD, or is it a CBD product that belongs in a dispensary that happens to be eye cream? You know what I mean? Like, let's get to the point where it's eye cream.
Who's your lawyer?
Who's your lawyer? Exactly. As we think about the technical aspect of it, kind of what we're doing, what we're looking to achieve. We're having this conversation this time next year. I want to hear maybe some things that you're working on now that you want to say, we did this in the last year. What do you think? What do you think?
For standardization?
For anything in the technical aspect of what you do and the work that you do with cannabis, we're sitting here next year and you say, this is something that I'm glad to have accomplished or started working on or launched.
Well, I really hate to tote more ASTM stuff, but
you don't hate it at all. We're here for it.
I'm ready.
As vice chair of the O4 on processing and handling, again, one of 14 technical subcommittees, I've had the privilege to be working with many volunteer members to create several initiatives. One we have going on is with the team at Solvent Direct, and I appreciate the opportunity to be invited to this amazing panel, is on compressed gas safety. You know, what are the standards around compressed gases in order to not only have safer end consumer products, but to ensure occupational health and safety during the manufacture of these products. We're also looking at a cleaning and safety initiative for the actual spaces themselves. Something as simple as, what does clean mean? Yeah. You need to have a specification for a clean working surface, and then you need a test method to be able to validate that that surface is indeed clean. And then perhaps you might also need to have certain types of approved cleaning agents that are fit for purpose in regards to coming in contact with, say, cannabis flower or extracts. And even something as simple as that haven't yet been fully determined. There's so many areas in regards to what research we can do and collect data to help create these amazing standards. And we're also doing an occupational health and safety initiative. I'm sure many of you are aware of the deaths that have gained publicity They have been happening, but these have finally actually started to make news. So we're working currently on a dust initiative, occupational health and safety in general, but we're working with NIOSH to specifically define what should be the aerosolized particle concentration limits when you're working with 5 different types of ground cannabis raw materials. So that would be whole plants, flowers themselves, and then seeds, stalks, and crystallized cannabinoids. Each one of those make unique types of dust, and understanding those characteristics is just some of the areas we're working on. There are a lot more that we're doing, but in those areas I think are just important to touch on.
I want to do like a quick PSA because the particulates thing is really dangerous, and people have different sensitivities to different molecules that are in those particulate matters, or just particulates in general. And so it's not just about whether the particulates are present or how many particulates are there. It's also about valuing and understanding that the people who are working and producing these products, some of them might be more sensitive to particulate matter, and that might be not the best fit for someone who is prone to asthma, or for someone I actually had that experience doing dry ice hash for the first time recently, where I was like, this is serious. And I just hadn't processed that much material ever before for me to need to be more serious about it. But I've seen that it was happening, and I knew that it was a serious I knew it was a serious issue. And all of these regulations and standards, they actually will make it easier for people to get started, and will make it more reproducible for us to use data from the community, from each other, because people will be using the same materials. And I love that you just had a million answers right away, and both of us are what do we share out of our grandiose ideas of where we see
I love your grandiose ideas, but you just launched something. Tell me what you just launched and what you're hoping in the next couple of quarters, what kind of traction you're hoping to get.
Okay, so we just launched a huge study. We're hoping that it's going to be the largest and most comprehensive study on consumers just in general, and the most inclusive study on cannabis consumers.
For general use patterns, because we don't understand what the average consumer is like.
Which is wild.
Right. So even thinking about future studies when we're using cannabis for different ailments or whatever it is, we need to be able to have a standardization of, what is the amount of cannabis that people use? How much should we be researching there? And we don't know. We've never researched that.
Yeah. Earlier this year, too, I started being more open and advocating more about specifically my own personal cannabis journey and what I use cannabis for, which is primarily being neurodivergent and all of the other complex things that comes within that. And there are unique therapeutic benefits that happen within unique niche demographics of people, demographics of users in general, but cannabis users, specifically medical users who use cannabis every day, or use multiple times a day, use every single form factor, etc. We're complicated population. We shouldn't be basing the research on us on the average, because none of us fit within that average whatsoever.
And we want to research highly stigmatized topics too. So we're talking about neurodivergence, but also cannabis and pregnancy, cannabis and driving. We know people are doing it all the time, so we need to be able to research it. But a lot of people don't trust the researchers, so they're not honest in even survey questions. So both of us have been very honest. We're daily cannabis users. We're also researchers, and we've kind of built this reputation on the internet, and people are more likely to be honest with us with their use because we're honest with them with our use. So I think that's kind of the impact of this survey, is we're really hoping we're getting real answers, and then we can study these topics more.
And the trust in the relationship of how that data is not going to be manipulated and then, brought back out to the public as we're the villains of
this negative light
of this story. Because just to touch on the pregnancy thing, I almost never thought I'd speak about this, but I've said that about a lot of things recently. And I did a deeper dive into SSRIs and other psychopharmaceuticals and pregnancy, just because I'm the age now where almost all of my friends that's happening. And so a lot of people said, hey, will you do a deeper dive on the pharmacology of this? I'm curious. And I've always been I'm not touching that with a 20-foot pole. I'm going to step back from that. And because I don't have plans to be a mother, and I think it changes everything. And I think it's the most important job that anyone could have. And I think that decision and the responsibility that you're doing when you're sharing your body and when you're going through that is intimate and not something that I would ever comment on someone else's decision on. However, I did look into the science, and I did look into like the research of what we do and don't know. It's out there. And it's pretty similar. Like, so if someone is having like a really difficult time, like, and they need to be potentially on like an SSRI or cannabis, we actually know there's a very similar amount of unknown. We do know that there's exposure prenatally. We do know that there's exposure that can happen in breast milk for both. We do know that it's possible, right? What we don't know is how much is significant to the child. What we don't know is what's the alternative for the mother. Because if you're totally sober, right, some people are out there raw dogging life. It's like, great.
God bless them. God bless them.
That's cool. But good for them. But there is definitely negative consequences with health that happen when that causes stress and cortisol levels in the brain for mothers and their children as well. And so there's a net benefit that is really difficult to analyze and to interpret. And I'm not saying that the psychopharmaceuticals are bad for mothers. I'm just saying that like the idea that it's way safer and that we have this like greater understanding of it is just not true.
And can we have the conversation? I think that's what we're asking in all of this is, can we have the conversation? Can we talk about it? Can we talk about it in a space that's not scary? Can we just find out? Can we just start?
Yeah.
Can
we're
we
not
just
saying
start?
we're not saying go take dabs.
No,
like I'm not
no.
like go do it. Like
We're
do
not
everything.
saying do it, and we're not saying don't do it. We're saying, what do you do?
Right.
We're saying we'd like to know. We'd like to know.
We're saying like, do you need to keep food down because you're not able to keep your food down, and then your baby needs to gain weight, and you're also diminishing in like pregnancy can be really, really difficult.
And then the women feel like they can't share their stories because it's so highly stigmatized. So then they go into isolation.
Well, they could lose their children too. I mean,
Right.
this
That's
is
real.
this is
It's
like a
real.
very in many states
places. Yep.
and many families. And many communities that it's a real risk of stigmatization for moms, and we like it. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
It continues to be a real risk until we can start addressing the fact that it's the same, or it can be. It can be. It isn't always, but it can be.
Recently, you asked on your Instagram, do I look like a stoner? And here's what I want to say. Look at whichever camera we're supposed to look at. This is what stoners look like. This is us. This is what we look like. We look like Sunday school teachers. We look like people who have PhDs. We look like mechanical engineers. We look like nanas. We look like sisters and daughters and brothers and mothers and fathers and all sorts of things. And this is what we look like. And
And stoner's not a bad word.
I don't
Just
think it's
because
a bad word.
There's such
I
a
love
negative
it.
connotation.
Take it back.
Just because you're a daily user.
No, not at all. Not at all. I want to make sure everybody can get a hold of you. I know LinkedIn is having a moment because...
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, like, we're all on LinkedIn because they don't shut us down and shadow ban us and do all sorts of bad things. So just whatever's the best way for people to be in touch with you, follow you on Instagram, go ahead and say that, and we'll have it printed on the screen when we do it.
Sure. LinkedIn is my primary thing. You can find it just by looking for Darwin Millard. So Darwin spelled like the scientist, and Millard's my last name. That's M like Michael, Illard. And you can also find me looking for the Spock of Cannabis on Instagram.
So I'm on social medias as Miyabe PhD, which is just my name, Miyabe PhD. But I actually think the best way to stay in contact, and I'm on LinkedIn too. I don't go on there as often. I try to, but I think that the best way, honestly, that I enjoy conversing with people one-on-one is through email, because I can say whatever I want. Like, it doesn't actually, I don't have to think twice about whether or not even choosing to use the correct molecule name will make it so that other people won't be able to be educated by like the content that I'm trying to deliver. And so you can go to projectchronic.com/email. And then for our nonprofit, we actually have, if anyone's interested in joining along with the network of applied pharmacognosy and what we're doing, and it doesn't have to, you don't have to even be like within research or within science or within medicine, but we're building it as a network because this is about science advocacy as a whole. You could go to appliedpharmacognosy.org and there's a form where you could sign up, and we will be contacting everyone. And we're really excited for what we could do as a whole once we get the terminology, once we get the standardization, and once we get the data.
Cool. Yeah. Find us on Network of Applied Pharmacognosy, but also my LinkedIn is Riley Kirk, RILEYKIRK. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok as Cannabicam. So,
Cannabicam.
Yeah, you can find that there.
Also, I achieved a panel with a Kirk and a Spock, so I'm feeling
That's
pretty
so
good.
cool.
Pretty good about that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Education, medication, all at its finest. It's a good life game.